I've listened to a few podcasts with British comic creators or comic adjacent critics talking about their start with comics, and mine's actually quite similar to a lot of people in that it seems to be a sort of three-step program from flat-out cartoony children's comics like the Beano, or I think nowadays it's often the Phoenix, on to sort of licensed action-adventure stuff. In my case, it was the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. There was actually a British Sonic comic called Sonic the Comic, which inexplicably the words Sonic the Hedgehog didn't appear on the cover. But it was they just called it Sonic the Comic, and they actually had British creators who, now that I know more about comics, some of them are actually quite well known in the field or did a lot of 2000 AD stuff. There's some early stuff in Sonic the Comic by a pre-fame Mark Millar, before he went on to create Kick-Ass and do various Avengers things. I read a lot of Sonic the Comic. I once had a Sonic the Comic confiscated from me age 13 from a teacher just so he could give it back to me the next day and say, I showed this to my children, and I said I confiscated it from a boy in year 9, and they were really surprised. Cheers, sir. Can I have it back now? It's a good story, that. Yeah, and then I think, the next step was then probably on from there to the American stuff. The superheroes, primarily, or at first anyway. The UK newsagent leaflets they do of like Spider-Man about 6 months to 9 months behind the American stuff. And then from there, as with a lot of people in my generation, to the sort of mature readers, teenage stuff like Preacher and that. And although I don't read as many superheroes as I used to, I guess I've kind of hovered in that region ever since, for the last 20 years, 25, 30. When trying to describe why I like comics, there's partly the fact that I think it's genuinely one of the great storytelling mediums in that I think when it works and when the art's good, I think it can evoke an image and a place and bring out, character in a way that's better than a lot of novels. I think it encourages imagination and weird images and ideas, and they seem to encourage people to go for something that's really cool and weird. The concepts seem harder to make. I don't know, something that would look silly in a TV show or sound ridiculous or incomprehensible in a book, like someone, I don't know, travelling into the concept of sound or something. You could, I'm 100% sure, but Grant Morrison has tried to do that in a comic at some point. You can probably try and get some poor bastard to draw it. You might want to give him a few ideas first, but I think there's something about comics and the sort of static image to static image, moving through images thing that encourages you to try that sort of thing, maybe. And I think that's really cool. And I do sometimes share the communal disappointment that they have this much potential and yet do seem to be largely superheroes, even though I love Spider-Man as much as the next person. Possibly a bit more. I do think that there's a lot of potential out there which is probably being ignored in favour of Batman tossing another poor citizen of the roof into the pile. I started writing comics. Well, I had a major false start on writing comics, I guess, when I was about 22, 23, I think, during my slightly aimless post-uni pre-job period, when I wrote a few scripts, got in touch with a few artists, had no money whatsoever, and therefore was unable to magic these comics out of nowhere. And yeah, it just sort of trailed off, to be honest. And so I went away for about 10 years, got a job, saved up a reasonable amount of cash, and came back with the ability to pay people page rates, which, funnily enough, does get the job done quicker. Also, to be honest, this time I took the common advice of maybe when you're getting started writing comics, don't immediately go, right, it's time for the first issue of my 50-issue epic maxi mega series, my Watchmen rivaling graphic novel. I just wrote a couple of 2, 3, 4 pages, a few 1-pagers. I'm now attempting some things in 20-page chunks, and even some things that might one day have a second issue, but it's been about building up slowly, which has in turn also helped me establish, some relationships with artists, which is helpful because it is, I mean all creative mediums, like working in them, is more social than people would perhaps like to dream when they start thinking, right, this is going to be a job where I can just sit in my basement. Realistically, the basement dream is, I know prose authors, and even they do not get to spend as much time in their basements as a lot of them would probably like. But yeah, comics especially, because it's even more communal, obviously, because it is actually a collaboration, you know, because I have to talk to the artist about what they're doing, give notes on stuff, a bit of back and forth on whether changes they want to make are good or bad. And yeah, it is a lot about the relationships with artists and stuff. And as I've got out there and met and worked with artists, and you know, worked with some artists on smaller projects and then built up to longer ones, that's definitely been a big part of why I think it's been more successful this time. That and the money, obviously, I can't pretend that doesn't help. Sorry guys.